Imagine walking into a VIP suite and seeing a shirtless, angry god of a man. Most people would run, but Victoria Halloway? She didn't run. She thought he was the budget entertainment. She looked the Alpha King, the most dangerous predator in the city, dead in the eye, called him Magic Mike, and tucked a crumpled dollar bill into his waistband. She told him to buy a smile. She walked away thinking she'd just tipped a grumpy stripper. She had no idea she'd just marked herself as the property of a beast who doesn't take charity. He takes what's his. And when he roared, "I only want you," it wasn't a request. It was a hunt. Welcome back to the pack, and a huge howl to our new listeners. You are tuned into at Sera Werewolf Romance Collection, your home for the most thrilling audio stories on YouTube. If you're ready for this alpha's obsession, please subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. I want to know where my pack is hiding. Drop a comment below and tell me, where are you listening from today? Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Miscalculation. The Gilded Oak Hotel smelled of beeswax, expensive perfume, and the faint, earthy aroma of the 300 moss-covered branches Victoria Torie Halloway had just spent 6 hours arranging in the ballroom. Torie wiped a smudge of chlorophyll from her cheek, blowing a stray curl of mahogany hair out of her eyes. It immediately sprang back, sticking to her forehead. She was exhausted. Her lower back throbbed a dull rhythm, and her combat boots felt like they were filled with lead shot. Being a botanical sculptor sounded whimsical on a business card, but in reality, it was just glorified manual labor with better aesthetics. Service elevator, she muttered to herself, squinting at the labyrinthine hallway of the VIP penthouse floor. Just find the service elevator, Torie, and you can go home to Sleaky and a frozen pizza. She turned a corner, spotting a door slightly ajar at the end of the corridor. A heavy bass beat thumped from a room nearby, likely the bachelorette party that had been shrieking at the pool earlier. Assuming the open door was the staging area for the event staff, she pushed it open and stumbled inside, dragging her tool bag. It wasn't the service elevator, it was a suite. A massive, dimly lit expanse of velvet and chrome that screamed, "Tax bracket unavailable." And standing in the center of the room, illuminated by the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, was a man. Torie froze. He was shirtless. That was the first thing her tired brain registered. The second was that he was glistening with sweat, his chest heaving as if he'd just run a marathon or fought a bear. He had ink-black hair that looked like a bird's nest of chaos, and a jagged silver scar bisecting his left eyebrow that gave him a dangerous, rugged edge. He spun around, his movement snapping with terrifying speed. His eyes, a turbulent, stormy gray-blue, locked onto hers. He looked furious, absolutely livid. "Get out," he growled. The sound vibrated in Torie's chest, deep and resonant. Torie blinked, her amber eyes scanning him. He was built like a brick wall, radiating heat and aggression. The thumping music from the bachelorette party next door leaked through the walls. Shirtless, sweaty, angry, next to a bachelorette party. The pieces clicked together in her exhaustion-addled mind. He wasn't a guest, he was the entertainment, and judging by his foul mood, he was having a terrible night. "Whoa, easy there, Magic Mike," Torie drawled, her sarcasm acting as a defense mechanism against his sheer size. She dropped her tool bag. "Let me guess, the bride-to-be passed out before you could get to the main event? Or did they short you on the tip?" The man froze, his eyes widening slightly. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with static electricity that made the hair on Torie's arms stand up. He stared at her, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled sharply. "What?" he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel crunching under tires. "You look like you chewed a lemon," Torie said, reaching into the front pocket of her canvas dungarees. She fished around past a packet of organic cashews and found a crumpled, lint-covered dollar bill. She smoothed it out against her thigh. She walked up to him. He didn't move. He seemed paralyzed, watching her with an intensity that should have sent her running. Instead, she felt a bizarre, magnetic urge to step closer. She reached out and tucked the dollar into the waistband of his expensive dress slacks. "Go buy yourself a smile, big guy," she said, patting his clammy shoulder. "You're way too tense for show business." She turned on her heel, grabbing her bag. "And fix the AC in here. It's stifling." She was halfway to the door when the air pressure in the room plummeted. It felt like the drop before a thunderstorm. A low, guttural sound started behind her, rising in volume until it wasn't human anymore. It was a roar that shook the glass panes in their frames. "I only want you!" Torie didn't wait to ask for clarification. She bolted into the hallway, the heavy door slamming shut behind her, leaving the echo of his voice ringing in her ears like a tinnitus of pure possession. Chapter 2. The Pursuit. Owen Gallagher stood in the center of the penthouse, his chest heaving, his hand gripping the edge of a mahogany table so hard the wood splintered under his fingers. Mate. The word hammered against the inside of his skull, relentless and demanding. The wolf inside him was clawing at the cage of his control, howling to tear down the door and chase the woman who had just walked out. The scent still lingered in the air, a rich, intoxicating blend of damp earth, wild jasmine, and something sharp like ozone. It was the smell of home. It was the smell of sanity. For the first time in weeks, the constant low-level migraine that plagued him, the burden of the alpha frequency, had vanished, silenced by her mere presence. "Sir?" Owen snapped his head toward the entrance as his beta, Eamon, rushed in. Eamon took one look at Owen's glowing eyes, molten gold bleeding into the gray, and the splintered table, and immediately lowered his gaze, baring his neck in submission. "We heard a roar," Eamon said, his voice tight. "Is there a threat?" "A woman," Owen ground out, forcing his eyes to dim, forcing the wolf to heel. It took every ounce of discipline he possessed. "She was just here, dungarees, smelled like a garden." Eamon blinked, confused. "The floral vendor? I saw her leaving via the service elevator. She looked spooked." Owen looked down at his waistband. The crumpled dollar bills sat there, mocking him. Go buy yourself a smile. The audacity. No one spoke to him like that. Everyone cowered or fawned or plotted. She had looked him in the eye, called him a stripper, and tipped him $1. He pulled the bill out, smoothing it with a reverence that terrified him. "Find out who she is," Owen commanded, his voice dropping to that dangerous octave that compelled obedience. "I want her name, I want her file, and I want to know why she was in my suite." "She's Victoria Halloway," Eamon replied instantly. "She's the botanical sculptor contracted for the Equinox Gala. We hired her company last week. You signed the check, sir." The Equinox Gala, the event he had been dreading, the event where the council elders would inevitably pester him about taking a mate from one of the high-ranking bloodlines. Owen walked to the window, staring down at the city streets below. He could almost track her scent through the glass, a golden thread pulling at his solar plexus. The separation was already starting to ache, a dull throb behind his eyes returning now that she was gone. "Is the contract finalized?" Owen asked. "Yes, but there's a clause for on-site supervision if the client requests it." Owen twisted the silver signet ring on his finger, a predatory smile touching his lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized the prey had walked willingly into his territory. "Cancel her point of contact with the event planner," Owen said. "I will be supervising the installation personally." Eamon hesitated. "Sir, you have the merger meetings, the council summit. You don't have time to watch a florist arrange petunias." Owen turned, his eyes flashing gold again. "Make time." He held up the dollar bill. "She thinks I'm the entertainment? Fine. Let's see how she handles the main event." Chapter 3. The Contract. The Gallagher estate was not a house, it was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Located on the edge of the city where the urban sprawl gave way to dense, ancient forest, it loomed against the gray sky like a monument to excessive wealth and privacy. Torie pulled her collar up against the wind as she waited at the massive iron gates. She felt ridiculous. She had practically fled the hotel last night, convinced a steroid-infused stripper was going to chase her down. "Victoria Halloway," she told the intercom. "I'm here for the site walkthrough." The gates groaned open. Torie adjusted the strap of her heavy satchel and began the long walk up the driveway. Her van, the trusty rust bucket, was currently making death rattles in her driveway, so she'd had to take 3 buses to get here. She reached the massive oak front doors, preparing her professional face. She needed this job. The bank had sent another final notice regarding her grandmother's greenhouse. If she didn't land the Equinox Gala commission, the wrecking ball was coming for the only legacy she cared about. The door opened. Torie put on her best smile. "Good morning. I'm looking for Mr. Eamon Vane, the..." The words died in her throat. Standing in the foyer wasn't an assistant. It was him, the stripper. He was dressed differently today. Gone were the sweatpants. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him with bespoke precision, straining slightly across broad shoulders that looked capable of lifting a sedan. The scar on his brow was stark against his tan skin. He looked expensive, lethal, and terrifyingly familiar. "Ms. Halloway," he said. His voice was deep, smooth like velvet wrapped around a knife. "We meet again." Torie's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked around the foyer, marble floors, priceless art, security cameras. "You," she squeaked, then cleared her throat. "You work here?" "I own here," he corrected, stepping closer. The air around him felt dense, heavy with a scent she couldn't place, rain and pine needles. "I am Owen Gallagher." Owen Gallagher, the CEO of Gallagher Holdings, the billionaire industrialist. Torie felt the blood drain from her face. She had tucked $1 into the pants of one of the most powerful men in the state. She had told him to buy a smile. Torie took a step back, her fight-or-flight instinct screaming flight. "I think there's been a mistake. I can't do this job. I'm clearly not a good fit." She turned to leave, panic rising in her throat. She couldn't work for him. The humiliation alone would kill her, and there was something about the way he looked at her, like he wanted to eat her, that set off alarm bells. "Ms. Halloway." Owen's voice wasn't loud, but it stopped her dead. It commanded her muscles to freeze. She turned back slowly. "I've reviewed your portfolio," Owen said, walking toward her. He moved with a prowling grace that was unsettling for a man of his size. "Your work is exceptional and unique." "I really think I should go," Torie stammered. "I'm doubling the contract fee," Owen said flatly. Torie stopped. She did the math in her head. Double the fee. That would pay off the greenhouse arrears entirely. It would buy her freedom. "And," Owen continued, stopping just inside her personal space, towering over her, "I'll release the full payment immediately. No waiting for net 30 terms. Today." He held out a pen. His hand was large, scarred, and steady. "Why?" Torie asked, her eyes narrowing, her amber gaze clashing with his storm gray ones. "I insulted you. I treated you like a piece of meat?" Owen's lip quirked up. "I've been called worse by better people. Do you want the job, Victoria? Or do you want to lose your greenhouse?" Torie stiffened. "How do you know about the greenhouse?" "I do my due diligence," he said softly. "So, do we have a deal?" Torie looked at the pen. She looked at the intense, terrifying man who somehow knew her secret motivation. She swallowed her pride. "Fine," she said, snatching the pen, "but strictly professional. No weirdness." Owen smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. It was dazzling and dangerous. "I wouldn't dream of it." Chapter 4. The Rain. The walkthrough had been excruciating. Owen hadn't let her out of his sight. He had followed her through the gardens, the ballroom, and the conservatory, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He didn't say much, just watched her hands as she sketched, watched her throat when she swallowed. By the time Torie escaped the estate, the sky had opened up. A torrential downpour was hammering the asphalt. She jogged to the end of the long driveway, pulling out her phone. The screen was black. Dead battery. "Perfect," she hissed, looking up at the gray clouds. "Just perfect." She started walking. The bus stop was 2 miles away. Within minutes, she was soaked to the bone. Her flannel shirt clung to her skin, and her boots squelched with every step. She was freezing, miserable, and mentally composing a resignation letter. A low rumble cut through the sound of the rain. An armored, matte charcoal luxury SUV rolled up beside her, moving at a crawl. The passenger window slid down. "Get in!" Owen's voice barked from the driver's seat. Torie kept walking, staring straight ahead. "I'm fine. I like the rain. It's exfoliating." The SUV lurched forward, cutting her off and forcing her to stop. The driver's side door flew open, and Owen stepped out. He didn't have an umbrella. He just stood in the downpour, ignoring the water soaking his expensive suit. "Get in the car, Victoria," he growled. He looked furious again. His jaw was clenched tight, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "You're shivering. Hypothermia isn't a business strategy." "I don't need rescuing," Torie shouted over the thunder, her independence flaring up. "And stop following me, it's creepy." "I am not following you. I am trying to keep you from dying of stupidity," Owen roared back. He took a step toward her, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. For a second, Torie thought he was going to grab her. He looked massive, looming over her in the rain, radiating that strange heat again. But he stopped himself, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, as if restraining a physical force. "Please," he said, the words sounding strangled. "Just get in." Before Torie could answer, a horn blasted. A neon yellow Jeep Wrangler with oversized tires careened around the corner, splashing a wave of mud onto Owen's pristine trousers. The Jeep screeched to a halt between them. The window rolled down, revealing a petite woman with pixie-cut blonde hair and a shirt that featured a cat riding a pizza slice in space. "Oof," the woman said, looking at Owen's mud-splattered legs. "That's gonna stain. Hi, I'm Remy. You must be the flower girl who tipped my brother $1. Torie blinked, water dripping off her nose. "Brother?" "Get in," Remy chirped, unlocking the doors. "I have heated seats and I promise not to growl at you. He gets grumpy when he's wet, like a gremlin." Owen pinched the bridge of his nose, looking defeated. "Remy, go home." "I am going home and I'm taking your soaking wet employee with me," Remy shot back. She looked at Torie. "Hop in, I have snacks." Torie looked at the furious, intense billionaire and then at the chaotic blonde in the yellow Jeep. It wasn't a hard choice. "Thanks," Torie said, scrambling into the Jeep. As they peeled away, Torie looked in the side mirror. Owen was still standing in the rain, watching them go, standing as still as a statue in the storm. Chapter 5. The Commute. The inside of the Jeep smelled like bubblegum and wet dog. The heater was blasting, which felt heavenly against Torie's frozen skin. "Sorry about the mud," Remy said, weaving the Jeep through the winding roads with alarming speed. "Actually, I'm not. He needed cooling off. He's been pacing around the house all day like a caged tiger. It's annoying." Torie squeezed water out of her hair. "Is he always like that?" "Like what? Intense? Brooding? Stares at you like he wants to figure out what you taste like?" Remy laughed. "Yeah, pretty much. That's just the Gallagher charm. We're an intense family." Torie shifted in her seat. "I didn't know he had a sister. He seems so solitary," Remy finished for her. "Yeah, Owen carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. Or, well, the weight of the company and the family business." Remy glanced at Torie, her expression suddenly serious, almost assessing. "You really shook him up, with the dollar thing." Torie groaned, covering her face with her hands. "Please don't remind me. I thought he was a stripper. I was tired. It was a mistake." "Best mistake ever," Remy grinned. "I haven't seen him that worked up in years. Usually he's just numb. You made him roar. That's rare." "He roared at me to leave," Torie corrected. "Is that what you heard?" Remy murmured, turning back to the road. "Interesting. What does that mean?" Remy tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. "Look, Torie, I'm going to be your driver for a while. Owen banned you from taking the bus. Something about security risks, which is code for he's obsessively protective. So we're going to be besties." "I can drive myself once my van is fixed," Torie protested. "Your van is a death trap," Remy said cheerfully. "Eamon ran the plates when you arrived. The report says it's basically rust held together by hope. Accept the ride. Besides, you'll need a guide dealing with Owen. He's complicated." "Complicated how?" Torie asked. "Is he involved in the mob? Is that why you have security gates?" Remy laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "The mob? Honey, the mob wishes they were us. No, it's nothing illegal, it's just heritage, old blood, lots of rules and traditions." She slowed the Jeep as they approached the city limits. She turned to look at Torie, her blue eyes sharp. "Just a warning, Torie. Owen isn't just a CEO, he's a leader. People follow him and people rely on him. When he decides he wants something, he doesn't stop until he has it. And right now—" Remy paused, her gaze dropping to Torie's neck, where her pulse was fluttering. "He seems pretty focused on you." "I'm just the florist," Torie said weakly. Remy smiled, and for a second, she looked exactly like her brother, predatory and knowing. "Sure," Remy said, "and the Titanic was just a boat. Buckle up, flower girl. It's going to be a wild ride." Chapter 6. Enter Sleaky. The next morning, the neon yellow Jeep Wrangler idled at the curb of Torie's apartment complex like a radioactive bumblebee. Remy Gallagher tapped her manicured nails on the steering wheel in time to a K-pop track blasting through the speakers. Torie emerged from the building, looking like a pack mule. She had her canvas tool bag slung over one shoulder, a large thermos of coffee in one hand, and a brightly colored plastic travel cage in the other. "Shotgun!" Torie announced, wrestling the door open. Remy lowered her sunglasses. "Good morning to you, too. Who's the passenger?" "This," Torie said, buckling the cage into her lap with grave seriousness, "is Sleaky. My van is dead, my landlord is fumigating the basement, and he has severe separation anxiety. If I leave him alone today, he will chew through the drywall out of spite." Remy peered into the cage. A rotund, ginger and white hamster stared back, his cheeks stuffed so full he looked like a fuzzy rectangle. "He looks judgmental." "He hates everyone," Torie confirmed, "especially men. Drive." 30 minutes later, they were in the Gallagher estate's massive glass conservatory. Torie set Sleaky's cage on a potting bench, opened the latch to give him fresh air, and went to work on the centerpiece, a spiraling tower of orchids and driftwood. Around noon, the heavy oak doors opened. Owen walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He wore dark jeans and a black t-shirt that clung to him in a way that should be illegal, highlighting the dense, corded muscle of his arms. He looked less like a CEO and more like someone who wrestled bears for cardio. "Remy said you were here," Owen said, his voice rough. He stopped 10 feet away, his nostrils flaring slightly. He frowned, catching a whiff of something musky and foreign beneath the orchids, but the overwhelming scent of mate washed it away before he could identify it. Torie wiped her hands on her dungarees, trying to ignore the way her pulse jumped. "I'm working, Gallagher. Unless you're here to hold a ladder, you're hovering." "I don't hover," Owen grumbled, stepping closer. "I supervise." He leaned his hand on the potting bench, right next to the open travel cage. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Torie warned, not looking up from her pruning shears. "Do what?" Owen asked. At that exact moment, a ginger blur launched itself from the cage. Sleaky, moving with the speed of a heat-seeking missile, latched onto Owen's pinky finger. Owen didn't scream, but he made a noise that sounded like a surprised kettle. He jerked his hand back, lifting the hamster into the air. Sleaky held on, his tiny legs dangling, eyes filled with pure rodent rage. "Get it off!" Owen commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating growl. "Is this a rat? Why is there a rat on my finger?" "He's a hamster." Torie dropped her shears and rushed over. "And he's protecting me. You're in his territory." "I own the territory," Owen argued, staring at the fuzzball attached to his digit. He looked genuinely baffled. He could crush the creature with a thought, but he stood frozen, seemingly terrified of hurting it. Torie grabbed a bag of dried apricots from her pocket. "Sleaky, drop it! Look, treats!" Sleaky ignored her, growling, a tiny, high-pitched squeak at the Alpha King. "He's not buying it," Owen said through gritted teeth. "He wants blood." "He has expensive taste," Torie sighed. She looked around, spotted the charcuterie board Remy had left on a side table, and grabbed a wedge of imported sharp cheddar. She waved it under Sleaky's nose. The hamster released Owen instantly, snatched the cheese, and scurried back into his cage to eat his prize, glaring at Owen the entire time. Owen inspected his finger. There was a tiny red mark. He looked at Torie, then at the hamster, then back to Torie. The terrifying alpha aura vanished, replaced by bewilderment. "Your rat is an assassin," Owen stated. "He's a bodyguard," Torie corrected, suppressing a smile. "And you survived. Barely." Owen huffed, rubbing his finger. "Next time, bring more cheese. I prefer not to be eaten in my own home." Chapter 7. The Strength. 3 days later, the supervision hadn't stopped. If anything, it had intensified. Owen didn't just watch anymore. He found excuses to be in the gardens whenever Torie was there. He took calls on the patio. He checked the perimeter fences. He inspected the irrigation systems. Torie was currently engaged in a war of attrition with a planter. It was a massive, neoclassical stone urn intended for the gala's entryway. It was filled with soil and a 10-foot decorative birch tree. It easily weighed 400 pounds. Torie had a dolly, but the wheel was stuck in a rut in the cobblestone path. She grunted, putting her shoulder into the stone, her boots slipping on the gravel. "Come on, you prehistoric paperweight, move!" "You're going to throw your back out," a deep voice rumbled from behind her. Torie didn't even turn around. "I've got it, Owen. Go merge a company or something." "It's stuck," Owen observed. He was suddenly beside her. He smelled like rain and expensive soap. "I know it's stuck," Torie snapped, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I just need to get the leverage right. If I can wedge the dolly under the lip." "Move," Owen said. It wasn't a suggestion. He stepped in front of her, placing one hand on the rim of the stone urn. Just one hand. He didn't brace his legs. He didn't take a deep breath. He didn't even grimace. He simply lifted. Torie watched, her mouth falling open, as Owen hoisted the 400-pound planter 3 inches off the ground with the casual effort of someone picking up a coffee cup. He kicked the dolly free from the rut with his foot, then set the planter back down gently. There was a heavy thud that vibrated through the soles of Torie's boots. Silence stretched between them. The birds in the trees seemed to stop singing. Torie looked at the urn. Then she looked at Owen's arm. He hadn't even flexed. "That weighs 400 pounds, Torie said, her voice flat. Owen froze. For a split second, a look of panic flashed across his stoic features, the look of a man who realized he had just broken character. He quickly adjusted his cuff, clearing his throat. "Adrenaline," he said. "Adrenaline?" Torie crossed her arms. "You weren't lifting a car off a baby, Owen. You were moving a fern." "I do CrossFit," he added, the lie sounding clumsy on his tongue. "Lots of functional strength training." Tire flips. Tire flips, Torie repeated skeptically. She walked up to the urn and tried to shove it. It didn't budge a millimeter. She looked back at him, her amber eyes narrowing. You lifted it with one hand. You didn't even bend your knees. That's not CrossFit, that's physics-defying. Owen shoved his hands into his pockets, looking everywhere but at her. It's lighter than it looks. Hollow core. It's solid granite. I have a meeting, Owen announced abruptly, turning on his heel. Don't hurt yourself, Victoria. He walked away toward the main house, his pace brisk. Torie watched him go, her heart hammering a strange rhythm. She wasn't scared exactly, but her brain was trying to reconcile what she had just seen with reality, and the math wasn't adding up. CrossFit, she muttered to herself, kicking the dolly. Yeah, right. Chapter 8. The Growl. By Friday, the tension at the estate was palpable. The equinox gala was a week away, and the delivery trucks were arriving in droves. Torie was by the service gate, signing for a delivery of rare moss from a third-party vendor. The driver was a guy named Rick, greasy hair, chewing gum loud enough to be heard from space, and eyes that wandered aggressively south of Torie's chin. So, Rick said, leaning against his truck and blocking Torie's path to the boxes. You work all the way out here alone? Pretty girl like you? I'm busy, Rick, Torie said coldly, trying to grab a box. Sign the manifest and let me work. Rick didn't move. He smirked, reaching out to graze her arm. Aw, don't be like that. You got a boyfriend? Because I get off at 5. Torie slapped his hand away. Touch me again and you'll be pulling that clipboard out of your throat. Rick's face darkened. He stepped closer, towering over her, using his bulk to intimidate. Feisty. I like that. Maybe you need someone to teach you some manners. A sound cut through the air. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrating rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. It was a sound so primal, so terrifyingly predatory, that Rick stopped mid-sentence, his face draining of all color. Owen was standing 10 feet away. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was wearing a tailored suit, but he looked wild. His shoulders were hunched, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His head was lowered, his eyes locked on Rick with a gaze that was pure, unadulterated violence. And the growl, that deep, chest-rattling sound, was coming from him. It hit Rick like a physical blow. The driver stumbled back, his clipboard clattering to the pavement. His hands shook uncontrollably. It was an instinctual reaction, the lizard brain recognizing an apex predator. Rick looked like he was about to wet himself. Leave, Owen said. The voice didn't sound like Owen. It sounded like gravel grinding together in a tectonic shift. It commanded absolute obedience. Rick didn't argue. He didn't even pick up his clipboard. He scrambled into the driver's seat, grinding the gears, and peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying everywhere. Torie stood there, her heart racing. She should have been terrified. A normal human reaction to seeing a man growl a truck driver into submission would be fear. But as she looked at Owen, who was breathing hard, staring at the retreating truck as if he wanted to chase it down and dismantle it, she didn't feel fear. She felt a hot, electric shiver run down her spine, a pull in her gut. Safety. Owen turned to her slowly, the rage in his eyes fading into panic as he realized what he'd done. Victoria, He was a creep, Torie said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. She picked up the clipboard. You have a very effective management style. Owen exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. He looked at her as if checking for injuries. Did he touch you? Tried to, Torie said. I handled it. I know, Owen said softly. He reached out, his thumb grazing her knuckles, a ghost of a touch that sent sparks flying up her arm. But you shouldn't have to. Chapter 9. Acts of Service. The weekend passed in a blur of work. Torie arrived on Monday morning prepared to battle the chaotic mess of the staging area. The potting shed had been a disaster zone, shelves rotting, tools disorganized, lighting dim. She pushed open the shed door and stopped. It wasn't a disaster zone, it was a showroom. The rotting wood shelves were gone, replaced by custom-built, heavy-duty industrial shelving made of sanded oak and black pipe. The flickering bulb had been replaced with warm, bright track lighting. Her tools, usually thrown in a pile, were hung on a magnetic strip, cleaned and sharpened. There was even a small, dedicated shelf at eye level. On it sat a fresh bag of organic cashews and a tiny, hamster-sized hammock. Torie stood there, her tool bag slipping from her shoulder. She hated owing people. She hated charity. It made her skin itch. She marched out of the shed and found Owen on the patio, drinking espresso and reading a tablet. "What did you do?" she demanded. Owen didn't look up. "Good morning, Victoria. I assume the coffee was to your liking?" "The shed," she said, pointing a finger at him. "You renovated my workspace. Why?" "Efficiency," Owen said calmly, turning a page on his tablet. "Clutter slows down production. Bad lighting causes eye strain, which leads to errors. I can't have errors at the gala." "Don't give me that corporate speak," Torie snapped. "That wasn't efficiency, that was custom carpentry, and you sharpened my shears, and you bought a hamster hammock." Owen finally looked up. His gray-blue eyes were guarded, but there was a softness at the corners. The creature was sleeping in wood shavings. It seemed undignified. "I can't pay you for this," Torie said, her voice tight. "I'm already taking double my rate. I don't take handouts, Owen." Owen stood up. He walked over to her, stopping just inches away. He was so tall she had to crane her neck. "It's not a handout," he said quietly. "You needed support. I provided it. That is how a partnership works." "We're not partners," Torie whispered. "I'm the florist. You're the billionaire client." "Titles are irrelevant," Owen murmured. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her jaw, warm and calloused. "You work hard, Victoria. Let someone make it easier for you. Just this once." Torie's defenses, usually an impenetrable fortress, crumbled a little. She looked at the man who could lift 400 pounds and growl like a beast, yet spent his weekend installing a hammock for a rodent who bit him. "Fine," she breathed, "but Sleaky hates the color blue. You might need to return the hammock." Owen smirked. "I'll notify the procurement department immediately." Chapter 10. The Shadow. It was late Wednesday. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the estate draped in heavy velvet darkness. Remy had left to pick up takeout, leaving Torie alone to finish wiring the main archway. The estate was silent. Too silent. Torie was working near the edge of the property, where the manicured gardens met the dense, ancient forest line. The air had grown cold, biting through her flannel shirt. She twisted a copper wire around a rose stem, a strange feeling creeping up the back of her neck. Primal instinct. The feeling of being watched. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. "Sleaky?" she whispered, though the hamster was back in the main house. A twig snapped, loudly. Torie spun around, aiming her wire cutters like a weapon. She peered into the tree line. It was pitch black, shadows merging with shadows. Then she saw them. 2 eyes, glowing, not reflecting light like a cat, but generating it, burning with a molten, golden luminescence. They were too high off the ground to be a wolf or a coyote. They were staring directly at her. "Who's there?" Torie called out, her voice trembling. "I have sharp objects." The eyes blinked. Then a shape detached itself from the darkness. Owen stepped out of the woods. He was shirtless again. His skin was slick with sweat, his chest heaving as if he had been running for miles. He wore only a pair of ragged athletic shorts. There were scratches on his arms, fresh ones, as if he had been tearing through brambles. But it was his eyes that froze Torie in place. For a second, just a heartbeat, they were still glowing that eerie gold. Then he blinked, and they were gray-blue again, though wild and dilated. "Owen?" Torie lowered the wire cutters, her breath hitching. "What are you doing? It's freezing." "Running," Owen rasped. His voice was rough, distracted. He didn't move closer. He stood at the edge of the light, his body tense, vibrating with energy. "Just clearing my head." "In the dark? Without a shirt?" Torie stepped closer, concern overriding her fear. "You're bleeding." She pointed to a scratch on his shoulder. Owen looked at the scratch. He seemed to focus on it, and Torie swore she saw the skin knit together slightly before he covered it with his hand. "It's nothing," he said sharply. "Go inside, Victoria, please." "Why?" Torie asked, the static in the air making her skin prickle. "What's out here?" Owen looked back into the forest, then at her. The longing in his expression was naked and terrifying. "Things that hunt," he whispered. "Go inside, lock the door. Don't come out until I say so." Before she could ask another question, he turned and vanished back into the shadows, moving with a silence that no human man should possess. Chapter 11. The Setup. The silence that followed Owen's disappearance into the woods was short-lived. Within 20 minutes, the sky bruised purple, and the wind picked up with a violence that rattled the teeth in Torie's skull. She had retreated to the main house, locking the patio doors as instructed. The estate felt vast and empty without Remy's chaotic energy filling the silence. Speaking of Remy, her phone buzzed on the kitchen island. "Torie, are you okay?" Remy's voice was tinny, shouting over the sound of rain hammering a metal roof. "I'm fine," Torie said, pacing the marble floor. "Where are you? The Thai food is going to get cold." "Forget the pad Thai. I'm stuck," Remy yelled. "The river flooded the bridge on County Road 9. It's under 3 feet of water and blocked by fallen trees. I'm parked at the diner 3 towns over. I can't get back to the estate." Torie stopped pacing. "What? So I'm stranded here?" "Yes. Look, the storm is a bad one. It's a code black storm. Do not go outside. Do not open the doors. Owen is probably out securing the perimeter, but he'll be back. Just stay put." The line went dead. Torie stared at the phone. Great. Just me, a hamster, and the brooding billionaire who heals like Wolverine. A crash of thunder shook the foundation of the house. The lights flickered, buzzed ominously, and then died, plunging the kitchen into pitch darkness. "Fantastic," she muttered, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the hallway. She needed to find candles, but as she moved toward the pantry, a thought struck her. The conservatory. The estate's glass conservatory was old, beautiful but old, and inside, sitting on a central pedestal, was the equinox spire, her nearly completed masterpiece. It was a delicate structure of driftwood, rare orchids, and fragile glass globes. If the wind was strong enough to wash out a bridge, the draft in that drafty glass house would turn her sculpture into kindling. "My grandma's greenhouse depends on that paycheck," she whispered to the empty room. Disregarding Remy's warning, Torie grabbed her heavy canvas coat. She wasn't going to let a storm destroy the work that was supposed to save her legacy. She pulled her hood up, grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight, and pushed open the side door. The wind hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her off the porch. The rain was coming down sideways, stinging her face like needles. Torie put her head down and ran toward the glowing silhouette of the conservatory across the courtyard. She didn't see the shadow moving in the tree line, watching her. She didn't see the gold eyes tracking her movement through the deluge. She just saw the glass doors of the conservatory rattling in their frames, threatening to shatter. Chapter 12. The Crash. Inside the conservatory, the noise was deafening. The rain hammered against the thousands of glass panes, creating a cacophony that sounded like prolonged applause. Torie shook the water from her coat and rushed to the center of the room. Her sculpture was vibrating. The wind was howling through the vents in the high ceiling, shaking the delicate orchids. Okay, hold on," she murmured, grabbing a tarp she had stashed under the potting bench. She began to secure the base, fighting the drafts that whipped the plastic around. Above her, the iron skeleton of the conservatory groaned. It was a metallic screech, like a dying train. Torie froze, looking up. A massive oak tree outside, swayed by the gale, smashed one of its heavy limbs against the roof. The glass shattered instantly, raining down shards like deadly confetti. But the branch didn't stop there. It struck a primary support beam, a heavy, rusted iron girder that spanned the width of the room. With a sickening groan, the bolts sheared off. Torie watched in slow motion as the iron beam detached from the ceiling. It was directly above her. It was heavy enough to crush a car, let alone a human woman. She tried to move. Her brain screamed, "Run!" but her boots were heavy, and the tarp was tangled around her ankles. She stumbled, fall to her knees on the wet stone floor. She looked up, throwing her hands over her head in a futile gesture of protection. The beam plummeted, a dark shadow blotting out the lightning. "I'm going to die," she thought. "I'm going to die in a greenhouse just like Grandma." Then, the air pressure in the room shifted. A blur of motion tore through the open door, faster than the wind, faster than thought. It was a mass of darkness and heat. Something slammed into her hard. Torie was tackled sideways, her face pressed into a chest that felt like a wall of hot stone. Strong arms wrapped around her, shielding her head and spine. Then came the impact. It wasn't a thud, it was a crunch. A wet, horrific sound of metal striking bone and flesh. The weight of the beam slammed into the back of the person shielding her. The force was so immense that the stone floor beneath them cracked. A guttural roar of pain tore through the room, not a scream, but a deep, animalistic sound that vibrated through Torie's own ribs. Dust and glass settled around them. The wind howled through the hole in the roof. Torie gasped, pushing herself up. The arms around her loosened, falling away heavily. "Owen?" she choked out. He was slumped over her, his weight pinning her legs. The iron beam, a massive, twisted piece of metal, was resting across his lower back, pinning him to the ground. Chapter 13. The Wound. "Owen!" Torie screamed, scrambling out from under his dead weight. She crawled to his side, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her flashlight. The beam rolled, illuminating the damage. Torie clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a retch. It was a massacre. The iron beam had crushed him. His shirt was shredded, soaked in dark arterial blood that pooled rapidly on the white stone floor. The angle of his spine was wrong. His shoulder blade was visibly shattered, a piece of white bone protruding through the ruin of muscle and skin. "Oh, God! Oh, God!" Torie sobbed, pressing her flannel shirt against the worst of the gash on his shoulder. It saturated instantly. "Owen, stay with me!" Owen was breathing in ragged, wet gasps. His face was pressed into the wet floor, his eyes squeezed shut. His skin was gray, beads of sweat mixing with the rain on his forehead. "Phone," Torie stammered. "I need ambulance." She ripped her phone from her pocket. The screen lit up, 20% battery, thank God. She tapped the emergency dialer, her fingers slippery with his blood. Owen's hand shot out. He gripped her wrist. His fingers were stained crimson, but his grip was iron. It wasn't the weak grasp of a dying man, it was immovable. "No," he rasped. Blood bubbled past his lips. "No, doctors." "Are you insane?" Torie screamed, trying to wrench her hand free. "Your back is broken. You're bleeding out. You will die in 5 minutes if I don't make this call." "Victoria," he growled. The sound was wet, rattling in his chest. He opened his eyes. They weren't gray anymore. They were burning, molten gold, the pupils slit like a reptile's. "Hang up." Torie froze, staring at his eyes. "Your eyes." "Hang up," he commanded. The voice hit her like a physical wave, compelling obedience. Her thumb hovered over the call button, trembling. "I can't let you die," she whispered, tears streaming down her face mixed with rain. "I won't die," Owen gritted out. He released her wrist and dug his fingers into the stone floor, his knuckles turning white. "Just watch, and don't scream." He let out a low, agonizing groan and pushed. With a strength that defied physics, he pushed his upper body off the floor, the massive iron beams shifting on his broken back. He snarled, muscles bunching, and shoved the 1,000-pound girder aside as if it were made of balsa wood. It clattered onto the tiles. He collapsed back onto his stomach, gasping. "Watch," he whispered. Chapter 14. The Reveal. Torie watched. She couldn't look away. It was a car wreck. It was a miracle. It was a horror movie. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, turning the blood on the floor black. Under the shredded remains of his shirt, Owen's body began to move. Not shift, rearrange. A sickening pop echoed through the conservatory. Torie flinched. The shattered white bone protruding from his shoulder didn't just slide back in, it was pulled by invisible strings. The flesh around it rippled like water. Crack! Snap! Squelch! The sounds were wet and osteological. Torie stared in horrified fascination as the jagged gouge in his back began to knit. Muscle fibers wove together like a high-speed loom. The skin stretched over the raw meat, stitching itself shut in seconds, pushing out a small shard of rust before sealing completely. The bruise on his spine, dark purple and black, faded to yellow, then to normal tan skin in the span of 3 heartbeats. Torie scrambled back until her back hit the potting bench. She was hyperventilating. What are you?" Owen lay still for a moment, the steam rising from his body as the accelerated metabolism burned off the trauma. Then, he placed his palms on the floor and pushed himself up. He stood. The man who had been crushed, broken, and bleeding 30 seconds ago stood up to his full height. He rolled his neck, and a loud crack signaled his vertebrae realigning. He turned to face her. His shirt hung in tatters around his waist. His chest was heaving, and his eyes, they were glowing beacons in the dark room. He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide the predator. He didn't dim the light in his eyes. He let her see the wolf. "I am not a victim, Victoria," he said. His voice was deeper now, layered with a growl that vibrated the glass panes that were still intact. "I am the apex." He took a step toward her. Torie pressed herself harder against the bench, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Logic told her to run. This was a monster. This was impossible. But her instinct, the deep reptilian part of her brain, didn't scream predator. It whispered protector. "You healed," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You put yourself back together." "My kind does not break easily," Owen said softly. He stopped 3 feet away, giving her space, though every muscle in his body seemed coiled to close the distance. He held out a hand, the same hand that had just crushed stone. It was steady. "Don't run. Please." Chapter 15. The Aftermath. Torie stared at his hand. It was stained with dirt and dried blood, but the skin was unblemished. "You're kind," she repeated, the words tasting like ash. She looked up at his face. The scar on his brow was white against his flushed skin. "The strength, the growling at the truck driver, the way Sleaky hates you." "Hamsters are excellent judges of character," Owen said, a dry, humorless smile touching his lips. "Werewolf," Torie said. The word hung in the damp air between them. Owen didn't flinch. Shifter, lichen, wolf. The names don't matter, the biology does. "And the eyes?" Torie asked, pointing a shaking finger at him. "The wolf is close to the surface," Owen explained. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them, the gold had faded back to the stormy gray-blue she was used to, though the intensity remained. "Especially when I am protecting what is mine." What is mine? The words sent a jolt of heat through Torie that had nothing to do with fear. She looked at the iron beam lying on the floor. He had taken that hit for her. He had broken his back to save her life. "You saved me," she said quietly. "I would do it 1,000 times," Owen vowed. He took another step, entering her personal space. The heat radiating off him was immense, like a furnace. "I told you there are things in the woods that hunt. I am one of them. But I do not hunt you, Victoria." Torie looked at his chest. The shredded shirt revealed a landscape of muscle and old scars. She reached out, her hand trembling, and pressed her palm against the skin over his heart. It was beating wildly, a rapid staccato rhythm that matched her own. "You're warm," she whispered. "I run hot," Owen murmured. He covered her hand with his own. The static shock that snapped between them was audible. "High metabolism. It's how we heal." Torie didn't pull away. The fear was evaporating, replaced by a profound sense of awe. She was standing in a ruined conservatory in the middle of a storm with a creature from mythology, and she had never felt safer. "So," she said, her voice regaining a bit of its usual sharpness, though her eyes were soft. "Does this mean I get hazard pay?" Owen let out a laugh, a genuine, startled bark of laughter that transformed his face. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that made her knees weak. "You can have the whole empire, Torie," he whispered against her skin. "Just don't run." "I'm not running," she said, realizing it was the truest thing she had ever spoken. "My van is broken, remember?" Owen smiled, and this time the gold flickered in his eyes again, not with rage, but with adoration. "Good, because I was about to carry you." Chapter 16. The New Normal. The walk back to the main house was a blur of rain and heat. True to his word, Owen didn't let Torie walk. He scooped her up as if she weighed nothing, shielding her body with his own as he sprinted through the deluge. He moved with a fluidity that was terrifyingly graceful. He didn't just run, he flowed over the terrain, anticipating every slick cobblestone and fallen branch. By the time they burst into the kitchen, Torie was breathless, not from exertion, but from the sheer proximity to him. Owen set her down on the marble island. He was dripping wet, his skin steaming in the cool air of the house. The shredded remains of his shirt hung from his waist like a loincloth, leaving his heeled back and broad chest fully exposed. "You're shivering," he murmured. He didn't seem cold. If anything, he was a furnace. "I'm wet," Torie pointed out, her teeth chattering. "And I just watched a man regenerate his spine." It's a lot to process. Owen disappeared for 10 seconds, literally 10 seconds, and returned with a thick plush towel and a black cashmere sweater that looked large enough to be a tent on her. "Dry off," he commanded, tossing the towel over her head. "I'll make tea." Torie rubbed her hair vigorously, watching him from beneath the terry cloth. He moved around the kitchen with efficiency, filling a kettle, grabbing mugs. It was such a domestic scene for a man who had just admitted to being an apex predator. "So," Torie said, her voice muffled by the sweater as she pulled it over her head. It smelled like him, sandalwood, rain, and something muskier, like deep forest ozone. "The wolf thing." Owen paused, a tin of tea leaves in his hand. He turned slowly. "Yes?" "Sleaky," Torie said, cutting to the chase. "He's a hamster, basically a rodent nugget. You're a wolf." Owen sighed, the sound rumbling in his chest. "I do not eat pets, Victoria." "But the instinct," Torie pressed, pushing her wet curls back. "You said you have a prey drive. Sleaky is prey. If he bites you again—" "If he bites me again, I will bribe him with more cheese," Owen said deadpan. He walked over to her, placing his hands on the marble counter on either side of her hips, trapping her. His eyes were gray-blue again, but the intensity was scorching. "My wolf recognizes what is important to me. You are important. Therefore, the rat is protected under pack law." "Hamster," Torie corrected, her heart skipping a beat. Rodent, Owen countered softly. He leaned in, his nose brushing against her damp hair, inhaling deeply.
You smell like the storm.
And you smell like trouble, she whispered, her hands resting on his bare forearms. The skin was hot, vibrating with a low-level hum of energy. Remy is going to freak out when she finds out I know. Remy has been betting on how long it would take you to figure it out, Owen admitted, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. She currently owes Eamon $50. Torie laughed, the tension finally breaking. She was sitting in a billionaire werewolf's kitchen, wearing his clothes, discussing hamster safety. It was insane. It was impossible. And yet, looking into his storm-colored eyes, she knew she wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 17. Acts of Service. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple and the estate littered with debris. Torie woke up in one of the guest suites, Owen had insisted, and immediately rushed to the conservatory. It was bad, but not catastrophic. The roof was open to the sky and glass was everywhere, but the equinox spire was still standing. Leaning precariously, but standing. We can save it, a deep voice said. Torie jumped. Owen was leaning against the doorframe. He was dressed in fresh clothes, dark jeans and a fitted Henley, but he looked restless. It's tilted, Torie said, chewing her lip. The central driftwood trunk is heavy. I need a crane to realign it, but the roads are still washed out. The crane won't get here in time for the gala. You don't need a crane, Owen said, pushing off the doorframe. He walked over to the sculpture. It was 12 feet tall, a massive assembly of ironwood and glass. It weighed at least 600 pounds.
Owen, be careful,
Torie warned. It's fragile. Guide me, was all he said. He stepped up to the sculpture, placed his hands on the base, and braced his legs. There was no straining, no grunting. He simply applied force. The massive structure shifted, groaning as it moved back toward its center of gravity. Left! A little more! Stop! Torie directed, rushing to jam a wedge under the base to secure it. Owen held the weight, 600 pounds of art, with the casual ease of someone holding a door open. He looked at her, his eyes clear and focused. Secure? Secure, Torie breathed, locking the wedge in place. He released the sculpture and stepped back, dusting his hands. He picked up a broom and began sweeping the shattered glass. Torie watched him. He was the Alpha King. He ran a conglomerate, and here he was, doing manual labor to save her flower arrangement. You don't have to do that, she said quietly. I can clean up. I broke the roof, Owen pointed out, not stopping. Technically, the mess is my fault. You broke the roof, saving my life. Owen paused. He looked at her, the broom still in his hand. The air between them crackled with that familiar static, the bond pulling them together like magnets. Then let me fix the rest, he said. I spent years building this estate to keep people out, Victoria. I built walls. I installed security systems. He took a step toward her. But you walked right in with a tool bag and a hamster and tore them all down. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Let me help you, he whispered. I don't want to control your work. I just want to be the foundation that holds it up. Torie leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. For a woman who had spent her life fighting to stand alone, the idea of leaning, just for a moment, was the most terrifying and beautiful thing she had ever felt. Okay, she whispered. You can sweep. Chapter 18. The Gala Prep. 3 days later, the Gallagher estate was transformed. The debris was gone, the conservatory was patched, and the Equinox Gala was 2 hours away. Torie was in the potting shed, frantically scrubbing chlorophyll off her hands with a pumice stone. She was wearing her nice dungarees, the ones without holes, but she was still woefully underdressed for a black tie event involving the werewolf aristocracy. I can't go, she muttered to Sleaky, who was asleep in his hammock. I look like a compost heap. The door creaked open. It wasn't Owen. It was Remy, holding a large, velvety black box. "Delivery!" Remy sang, dodging a hanging fern. "From the big bad wolf!" Torie wiped her hands on a towel. "Remy, I can't go out there. There are elders. There are people who smell fear. I smell like fertilizer." "You smell like mate," Remy corrected with a wink, "which means you're basically royalty. Now open the box." He picked it out himself. "And don't ask me how he got your measurements. Apparently, he can calculate hip-to-waist ratios just by looking at you. It's an alpha thing. It's creepy, but useful." Torie opened the box. Inside sat a gown of midnight blue silk, so dark it looked black in the dim light. It was sleek, structured, and stunning. Nestled on top was a note written in sharp, angular handwriting. "Armor." "Oh, he knows you," Remy sighed wistfully. "It's not a princess dress. It's a power suit disguised as a gown. Put it on. I have a hair team waiting in the kitchen." An hour later, Torie looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The dress fit like a second skin, hugging her curves and flaring slightly at the feet. The deep blue brought out the gold in her amber eyes. Her unruly curls had been tamed into a sophisticated loose updo, secured with silver pins. She didn't look like the help. She looked dangerous. "Wow," Remy breathed. "Okay, you're ready." "I'm terrified," Torie admitted, smoothing the silk. "Don't be," Remy said, her voice turning serious. "The council is going to judge you. They're going to look for weakness. But you have something they don't." "What?" "You have the alpha," Remy said. "And looking at you in that dress, I think he'd burn the world down if you asked him to." Torie took a deep breath. She thought of Owen lifting the sculpture. She thought of him healing his broken spine. She thought of the note. Armor. "Okay," Torie said, lifting her chin. "Let's go face the wolves." Chapter 19. The Gala. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and predatory gazes. The moment Torie stepped onto the balcony overlooking the floor, the chatter didn't stop. It shifted. She could feel the eyes, hundreds of them, and she could hear them too. The acoustics of the room seemed to amplify the whispers. "That's the human? The gardener? She smells like him, like the king." Torie gripped the railing. She scanned the crowd for Owen. She saw him near the bar, surrounded by a group of older men in severe suits. He looked bored, twisting the silver ring on his finger. Then he looked up. His eyes locked onto hers across the room. The boredom vanished. He went perfectly still. Even from this distance, she saw his pupils dilate, swallowing the gray. He started moving toward the stairs, cutting through the crowd like a shark through water. People parted for him instinctively. But someone intercepted her first. An older man blocked her path at the bottom of the stairs. He was thin, with skin like parchment and eyes like chips of ice. He held a cane that looked more like a weapon. "So," the man sneered. His voice was dry and rattling. "This is the pet my king has chosen." Torie stiffened. "Excuse me?" "I am Elder Montgomery," the man said, looking her up and down with undisguised disgust. "Head of the council. We expected better. A lineage, a bloodline, not a dirt scratcher who smells of fertilizer and mortality." The insult stung, but Torie didn't shrink. She remembered who she was. She remembered the dollar bill. "I'm a sculptor, Mr. Montgomery," she said, her voice clear and sharp enough to cut through the nearby conversations. "And I'd rather smell like dirt than mothballs and irrelevance." A hush fell over the immediate circle. Montgomery's face turned a violent shade of red. "You insolent little—" He raised his cane, not to strike but to gesture aggressively. A low, vibrating growl filled the space. It wasn't loud, but it resonated in the chest of everyone nearby. Owen was there. He moved between Torie and the elder, placing his back to Torie, creating a living wall of black tuxedo and muscle. He didn't look at Torie. He stared down at Montgomery. His eyes were flashing gold. "Careful, Montgomery," Owen said softly. His voice was the alpha command, layered, heavy, and terrifying. "You are speaking to my guest." "She is a human, Owen," Montgomery hissed, though he took a step back. "She is weak. She does not belong in our world." Owen reached back, finding Torie's hand. He interlaced their fingers, holding on tight. "She is not weak," Owen said, his voice rising so the whole room could hear. "And she is not just a guest." He turned to Torie, lifting her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in front of the entire council. "She is mine," Owen declared, "and anyone who disrespects her disrespects the crown." Montgomery paled. To challenge the Alpha's claim publicly was treason. He bowed, stiff and angry, and retreated into the crowd. Owen looked at Torie, searching her face for fear. "Are you all right?" Torie squeezed his hand, her heart hammering a victory rhythm. "I told you, I have sharp objects. Or sharp words in this case." Owen grinned, a feral, proud thing. "That's my girl." Chapter 20. The Library. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, replaced by something heavier, hotter, and infinitely more dangerous. The air in the ballroom felt stifling. The scent of the wolves, the perfume, the champagne, it was too much. "I need air," Torie whispered to Owen. "Way ahead of you," he murmured. He led her away from the crowd, through a side door, and down a quiet corridor lined with portraits of stern-looking ancestors. He pushed open a heavy mahogany door at the end of the hall. The library. It was 2 stories high, filled with the scent of old paper, leather, and hymn. Owen locked the door behind them. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. He turned to face her. The restraint he had shown in the ballroom, the stoic mask of the king, cracked. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, backing her up against the nearest bookshelf. "You were magnificent," he growled, bracing his hands on the shelf on either side of her head. "Telling Montgomery he smelled like mothballs? I nearly lost control right there." "He was a jerk," Torie breathed. Her pulse was racing. Being this close to him, with the adrenaline still spiking her blood, was intoxicating. "He called me a pet." "You are not a pet," Owen said fiercely. He lowered his head, his nose brushing the sensitive skin of her neck. "You are a queen. You stood your ground against a council elder without flinching. Do you have any idea what that does to me?" "Tell me," Torie challenged, her hands finding the lapels of his tuxedo jacket. "It makes me want to burn this house down," Owen whispered against her throat. "It makes me want to take you right here on the floor and mark you so deeply that everyone knows exactly who you belong to." Torie gasped as his lips found the pulse point under her ear. The static she had felt before was now a roaring fire. Her body felt heavy, pliable, drawn to him by a force that felt ancient. "Then do it," she whispered. Owen pulled back, his eyes fully gold. "Victoria, be sure. Once we cross this line, the bond is sealed. There is no going back. I will never let you go." Torie looked at him. She saw the man she had tipped with a crumpled dollar bill, the man who had built a hammock for her hamster, the man who had broken his back to save her. She reached up, tangling her fingers in his messy black hair, and pulled his mouth down to hers. "I'm not going anywhere, Owen," she said against his lips. "Claim me." Owen groaned, a sound of pure, unadulterated surrender, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. It was the storm finally breaking. He lifted her up, wrapping her legs around his waist, and carried her toward the large leather armchair by the fire, the rest of the world falling away until there was only the heat, the scent, and the man who was finally, completely hers. Chapter 21. The Morning After. Sunlight filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of the master suite, painting stripes of gold across the tangled sheets. The air in the room was heavy with the scent of sandalwood, sex, and the deep, earthy musk of a mate claim. Torie stirred, her body aching in a way that felt entirely satisfying. She blinked her eyes open, expecting to see the ceiling. Instead, she saw a wall of tan, scarred muscle. Owen was asleep. The Alpha King, who usually slept with the lightness of a soldier in enemy territory, was out cold. His arm was thrown heavily over her waist, pinning her to the mattress, and his face was buried in the curve of her neck. Torie smiled, reaching up to brush a lock of ink-black hair from his forehead. The tension that permanently etched lines around his eyes was gone. He looked younger. He looked peaceful. A soft, squeak snore interrupted the moment. Torie lifted her head slightly. She glanced at the nightstand where she had placed the travel cage the night before. The door was nudged open. She looked back at the bed. There, perched precariously on the center of Owen's chest, rising and falling with his deep breaths, was Sleaky. The hamster was curled into a ginger and white ball, looking undeniably smug. "Traitor," Torie whispered. Owen shifted. A low, rumbling groan vibrated in his chest and directly into Sleaky. The hamster didn't move. He just burrowed deeper into the warmth of the alpha. Owen opened one eye. It was gray-blue, lazy and heavy with sleep. Then he focused on Torie, and the gold flared instantly, bright and possessive. "Morning," he rasped. His voice was a wreck, deep enough to rattle the nightstand.
Morning,
Torie whispered back. "You have a rodent on your sternum." Owen looked down, crossing his eyes slightly to see the furball. "He accepts the pack hierarchy. Finally." "Or he's holding you hostage for more cheese," Torie countered. Owen smiled, a genuine, lopsided grin that made Torie's heart stutter. He tightened his grip on her, pulling her closer until they were flush against each other. "Let him have the cheese. I have everything I want right here." He leaned in to kiss her, and for a moment, the world outside the bedroom door ceased to exist. It was just warmth and skin and the overwhelming sense of home. Then, a sharp, frantic knocking shattered the peace. "Sir!" It was Eamon's voice, muffled by the heavy oak door but edged with panic. "Sir, I am sorry to disturb you, but the council, they are here, all of them." Owen went rigid. The lazy warmth evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, hard tension of the alpha. He sat up, dislodging an indignant Sleaky, who tumbled onto the sheets with a squeak of protest. "Tell them to wait," Owen growled, swinging his legs out of bed. "They aren't waiting, sir," Eamon replied. "They have invoked the old laws. They are in the Great Hall, and they are demanding the presence of the human." Torie sat up, pulling the sheet around her. The reality of the previous night, the insults, the public claim, the confrontation with Montgomery, came rushing back. Owen stood, naked and unashamed, his body a map of power and violence. He turned to her, and the look on his face terrified her. It wasn't fear, it was the look of a man preparing for war. "Stay here," Owen commanded softly. "No," Torie said, sliding out of bed and grabbing his discarded dress shirt. She pulled it on, buttoning it with shaking fingers. "You claimed me in front of them, Owen. If I hide now, I prove Montgomery right. I prove I'm weak." Owen looked at her, his jaw working. He wanted to lock her in this room and stand guard at the door. But he saw the fire in her amber eyes, the same fire that had made her tuck $1 in his pants. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Get dressed, Victoria. We go together." Chapter 22. The Ultimatum. The great hall of the Gallagher estate was a cavernous space of stone and shadow, usually reserved for pack meetings. Today, it felt like a courtroom. 12 elders stood in a semicircle. At their center stood Elder Montgomery, leaning on his cane, his face twisted into a mask of self-righteous fury. When Owen and Torie entered, the silence was deafening. Owen wore fresh dark jeans and a black sweater, his hand firmly gripping Torie's. Torie had changed into her clean dungarees and boots. She looked small next to the alpha, but she held her head high. "You summoned us," Owen said. His voice echoed off the stone walls, calm and lethal. "Speak, and then get out of my house." "You have broken the covenant, Owen," Montgomery spat. "You have mated with a human. You have polluted the bloodline of the kings." "I have chosen my mate," Owen corrected, his eyes flashing dangerous gold. "The moon goddess decides the bond, Montgomery. Not you, not the council." "The goddess does not make mistakes," Montgomery shouted, striking his cane on the floor. "But men do. You are blinded by lust for this fragile creature. You cannot lead the pack with a liability at your side. A Luna must be strong. She must be a wolf." "She is stronger than any of you," Owen snarled, stepping forward. The air pressure in the room dropped, the sheer weight of his alpha aura forcing several elders to flinch. "Test her again, and I will remove your tongue." "Then let her prove it," Montgomery pointed a bony finger at Torie. "We invoke the right of the moon." A gasp went through the room, not from the elders, but from Eamon and Remy, who stood by the doors. Owen went still, deadly still. "No." "It is the law," Montgomery smiled, a cruel, thin expression. "If the fitness of a potential Luna is challenged, she must walk the ancestral forest for one night, alone. If she survives until sunrise, she is worthy. If she dies, the goddess has judged her." "She is human," Owen roared, the sound tearing from his throat. "The ancestral forest is filled with ancient magic and rogue beasts. It is a death sentence." "Then renounce her," Montgomery said softly. "Reject the bond. Step down as alpha or send her away. Those are your choices. Refuse the right, and you forfeit the crown. Civil war will tear this pack apart before sunset." Owen's hands clenched into fists. He looked ready to tear Montgomery apart right there. He would burn the pack to the ground to keep her safe. "I choose war," Owen growled, his claws beginning to lengthen. "No," Torie said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the testosterone and magic like a knife. She stepped out from behind Owen. She looked at Montgomery, then up at Owen. She saw the agony in his eyes, the willingness to destroy his legacy for her. She couldn't let him do that. She loved him too much to be the reason he lost everything. "I accept," Torie said clearly. "Victoria, no!" Owen grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "You don't know what you're saying. You won't last an hour." "I'm a gardener, Owen," she said, managing a shaky smile. "I know the woods. I know plants. I know how to survive." She turned to Montgomery. "I will walk your forest, old man, and when I come out tomorrow morning, you will bow." Chapter 23. The Departure. The sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the edge of the estate where the manicured lawn met the dense, foreboding wall of the ancestral forest. Torie sat on the tailgate of Remy's Jeep, tying the laces of her heavy combat boots. She was dressed for work, thick canvas pants, layers of flannel, a heavy coat, and her thickest leather gardening gloves tucked into her belt. "Here," Remy said, her voice trembling. She handed Torie a small canister. "Pepper spray. It's bear grade. And this," she handed her a silver pouch, "wolfsbane dust. If anything gets close, throw it in their eyes." "Thanks, Rem," Torie said, tucking the items into her belt. She tried to project confidence, but her stomach was twisting in knots. Owen stood a few feet away. He hadn't spoken since she accepted the challenge. He was vibrating with suppressed rage and terror. He looked at the forest line as if he wanted to fight the trees themselves. "Time!" Eamon called out from the perimeter. "The sun is down!" Torie hopped off the tailgate. She walked over to Owen. He looked at her, his eyes raw. "I can't follow you," he whispered, the words sounding like they were being torn out of him. "The right. There is a barrier. If I cross it before sunrise, I forfeit the claim. They win." "I know," Torie said. She reached up, cupping his face. His stubble scratched her palms. "I don't need you to follow me, Owen. I need you to trust me." "It's not you I don't trust," Owen said raggedly. He pulled a small object from his pocket. It was his silver signet ring, the heavy one with the Gallagher crest. He pressed it into her hand. "Take this. It has my scent. It might make the lesser beasts hesitate." Torie slid the heavy ring onto her thumb. It was too big for her finger. It smelled like him, rain and pine. "I'll see you at sunrise," she promised. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a desperate, bruising kiss, held with all the things they hadn't had time to say. "One-on-one only," she whispered against his lips. Owen let out a choked sound, pulling her into a crushing hug before abruptly releasing her. "Go, before I break the law and chain you to the house." Torie turned and walked toward the tree line. She didn't look back. She knew if she saw his face again, she wouldn't have the courage to step into the dark. She crossed the threshold. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. The sounds of the estate, the wind, the birds, vanished, replaced by a heavy, unnatural silence. The ancestral forest swallowed her whole. Chapter 24. The Woods. The woods were not like normal woods. Torie realized that within the first 10 minutes. The trees were too big, their twisted roots rising from the ground like skeletal fingers. The moss didn't look soft, it looked parasitic. And the silence, it wasn't empty, it was watching. Torie clicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow path through the oppressive gloom. "Okay, Torie," she whispered to herself. "It's just plants. You deal with plants every day. These ones just have an attitude." She moved cautiously, testing every foothold. Her botanical knowledge, usually reserved for arranging bouquets, shifted into survival mode. She recognized aconitum, wolfsbane, growing wild near a stream, and gave it a respectful nod, patting the pouch of concentrated dust Remy had given her. She spotted toxicodendron, poison sumac, hanging low over the path and ducked under it, careful not to let the leaves brush her skin. 2 hours in, the environment turned hostile. She stepped on a patch of leaves that gave way. It was a pit trap, old, likely dug by a hunter years ago. She scrambled back just in time, her boot slipping on the edge. She peered down. The bottom was lined with rusted spikes. "Friendly," she muttered, heart hammering against her ribs. She kept moving. She had to stay awake. She had to stay mobile. Around midnight, she heard it. A snap. Torie froze, clicking off her light. She crouched low behind the massive root system of an ancient oak. She held her breath, gripping the bear spray in one hand and the packet of wolfsbane in the other. Something was moving in the brush. Heavy footsteps. 4-legged. A coyote? A wolf? A low, snuffling sound drifted toward her. Torie pressed the silver signet ring against her nose, inhaling Owen's scent to ground herself. Please work. Please let his scary alpha smell be enough. The creature moved closer. It paused near the tree. Torie could hear its wet breathing. Then it whined, a high, fearful sound, and bolted in the opposite direction. Torie exhaled, sagging against the bark. The ring worked. Owen's scent was a deterrent. She checked her watch. 2 a.m. 4 more hours until sunrise. "I can do this," she whispered. "I'm going to survive this, and then I'm going to charge Montgomery a consultation fee for his landscaping." She stood up to move again, but as she turned, a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. It was the same feeling she'd had the night Owen emerged from the woods, the feeling of being hunted. But this time, it didn't feel safe. It felt like malice. Chapter 25. The Assassin. Deep in the estate, Owen was pacing. He had worn a track in the rug of the library. "Sir," "You need to sit," Eamon said gently. "You are bleeding." Owen looked down at his hands. He had been clenching his fists so hard his nails had cut into his palms. He didn't feel it. All he felt was the bond, the thin, golden thread connecting him to Torie. It was stretched taut, vibrating with her fear. "She's scared," Owen rasped. "She's terrified." "It is the forest," Eamon said. "It is designed to be frightening." "No!" Owen shook his head, his eyes flashing wild gold. "This is different. It's sharp, immediate." Suddenly, the Bond screamed. A spike of pure, unadulterated terror hit Owen so hard he staggered, grabbing the desk for support. "Rook!" Owen roared. Eamon went pale. "What?" "Montgomery sent Rook," Owen snarled. "I can smell him on the wind. I can feel him closing in on her." Rook was not a simple rogue. He was a hired killer, a wolf with no pack and no honor, often used by the council for problems that needed to disappear. He wasn't part of the natural forest dangers. This was an execution. "Sir, the barrier," Eamon warned. "If you cross it, you lose the crown." "To hell with the crown!" Owen shouted. He didn't run to the door. He ran to the window. He shattered the glass with his shoulder, launching himself out into the night. He shifted in midair, his clothes shredding as the massive midnight black wolf exploded from his human form. He hit the lawn running, tearing up the grass with claws the size of knives. He didn't care about the laws. He didn't care about the elders. He only cared about the terrified heartbeat he could hear 3 miles away. In the woods. Torie ran. She didn't know what it was, but she had seen the eyes. Red eyes. Not gold, not the warm, molten color of her mate. These were the color of dried blood. A massive gray wolf, larger than any natural animal, mangy and scarred, stepped out onto the path ahead of her, blocking her escape. It snarled, dripping saliva. Torie skidded to a halt, backing up. She fumbled for the bear spray. The wolf, Rook, didn't hesitate. He lunged. Torie sprayed. The chemical cloud hit the wolf in the face. He yelped, shaking his head, but his momentum carried him forward. His shoulder slammed into her, sending her flying into a tree trunk. The air left her lungs. Pain exploded in her ribs. Rook recovered, shaking off the spray. He stalked toward her, a low, sadistic growl rolling from his chest. He wasn't hunting for food. He was enjoying this. Torie scrambled backward, grabbing a handful of the wolfsbane dust. She threw it. It hit his nose. Rook sneezed violently, backing up, pawing at his snout. It bought her seconds. "Owen!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. Rook shook off the dust. He was angry now. He crouched, muscles bunching for the killing strike. Torie squeezed her eyes shut, clutching the silver ring, bracing for the teeth. Crack! The sound of the barrier shattering echoed through the forest like a gunshot. A howl rose in the distance, a sound of such apocalyptic rage that the trees themselves seemed to shiver. The black wolf was coming. Chapter 26. The Shift. Torie was going to die. The realization didn't come with panic. It came with a cold, sharp clarity. She was backed against the rough bark of an ancient oak, her chest heaving. Every breath sent a spike of agony through her bruised ribs where she had hit the tree. The canister of bear spray lay empty in the dirt. The pouch of wolfsbane was gone. Rook, the assassin, shook his massive, mangy head, clearing the last of the dust from his sinuses. He turned his red eyes toward her. He didn't growl this time. He went silent, the silence of a predator that knows the chase is over. He crouched, muscles coiling like steel cables under his scarred gray fur. "Owen!" Torie screamed one last time, squeezing the silver signet ring on her thumb so hard the metal bit into her skin. Rook launched himself. Time seemed to fracture. Torie saw the yellow of his teeth. She smelled the rot on his breath. She felt the wind of his movement, but she didn't feel fear. Deep inside her chest, behind the bruised ribs and the frantic human heart, something snapped. It wasn't a break. It was an unlocking. A door that had been rusted shut for generations suddenly blew off its hinges. Heat. It wasn't a fever, it was a supernova. It started in her marrow and exploded outward. Torie gasped, but the sound wasn't human. It was a wet, tearing sound. Pain, absolute and white-hot, racked her body. Her bones didn't just break, they liquefied and reformed. Her spine arched, cracking with the sound of a pistol shot. The pain should have killed her, but the adrenaline, the sheer raw power flooding her veins, erased it. Rook hit her, or he tried to, but the woman he had aimed for was gone. In the fraction of a second before his jaws could close on her throat, a blast of pure kinetic energy threw him backward. He tumbled through the air, slamming into a tree 10 feet away. Torie fell forward onto her hands and knees. Her skin felt too tight. Her senses were overloading. She could smell the sap in the trees, hear the heartbeat of a beetle under the soil. She looked at her hands. They weren't hands. They were massive paws, covered in fur as white as untouched snow. She stood up, and up, and up. She towered over the underbrush. She was larger than Rook. She was larger than any wolf that had ever walked these woods. She felt the power rolling off her in waves, a physical weight that pressed down on the forest. She threw her head back and let out a howl. It wasn't a cry for help anymore. It was a declaration. A song of moonlight and ice that silenced the entire forest. Chapter 27. The Fight. Rook scrambled to his feet, shaking his head. He looked up, expecting to see a broken human body. Instead, he froze. His red eyes widened in primal terror. Standing before him was a creature of myth, a white wolf. Her fur was luminous, glowing faintly in the gloom of the forest. Her eyes were pure, molten amber, burning with an intelligence and power that was crushing. Rook whimpered. He took a step back, his tail tucking between his legs. He was an assassin, a killer of alphas, but this was a goddess. Torie didn't growl. She didn't need to. She simply walked toward him. Her gait was fluid, heavy, and silent. Every step she took radiated authority. Rook snapped, a desperate defensive lunge. Torie didn't flinch. She moved with a speed that blurred the air. She swatted him, a casual, backhanded blow with her massive paw. The force of it sent the 400-pound gray wolf spinning through the air. He crashed into the dirt, whining. She was on him in an instant. She pinned him, one white paw pressing his head into the mud. She loomed over him, baring teeth that were sharper and whiter than bone. She could crush his skull with a single bite. "Submit," the command echoed in her mind, not a word but a force of will. Rook went limp, exposing his throat, surrendering completely. Suddenly, the brush to her left exploded. A massive midnight black wolf burst into the clearing. It was Owen. He was frothing, his eyes wild with the madness of a mate who believes he is too late. He saw the gray wolf on the ground and let out a roar of fury, preparing to tear Rook apart. Then he saw her. Owen skidded to a halt, his claws tearing deep furrows in the earth. He stared. The rage drained out of him instantly, replaced by a shock so profound he nearly stumbled. The white wolf lifted her head from the cowering assassin. She looked at the black wolf. Owen lowered his head. He didn't bow out of fear. He bowed out of worship. He whined softly, a sound of disbelief and adoration. He crept forward, his belly low to the ground, approaching her with absolute reverence. Torie stepped off Rook, who scrambled away into the darkness, never to be seen again, and met Owen in the center of the clearing. The black wolf and the white wolf stood nose to nose. The contrast was stunning, ink and light, storm and moon. Owen licked her muzzle gently. Torie huffed, rubbing her cheek against his thick neck fur. The bond between them didn't just snap into place, it solidified into something unbreakable. Chapter 28. The Return. The sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. The rite of the moon was over. At the edge of the forest, the entire pack had gathered. Elder Montgomery stood at the front, leaning on his cane, a smug expression plastered on his thin face. Eamon and Remy stood nearby, looking pale and sick with worry. "The sun is up," Montgomery announced, his voice carrying over the silent crowd. "The human has not returned. As expected, the forest has cleansed the bloodline." He turned to the pack. We must mourn our king, who foolishly forfeited his crown to chase a ghost. But the law is the law. We must choose a new—" Eamon pointed toward the tree line. "Look!" Montgomery turned, a sneer ready on his lips. It died there. Out of the mist, two figures emerged. On the left, a massive black wolf, scarred and powerful, walking with the gait of a king. On the right, something impossible. A white wolf, larger than the king, radiating a light so pure it seemed to dim the sunrise. Her coat was pristine, unblemished by the mud or brambles. She walked with a regal, predatory grace that made the air feel thin. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It started as a murmur and grew into a wave of shock. "The white wolf," someone whispered. "The prophecy," another voice trembled. Montgomery took a step back, his face draining of all color. He shook his head, denial warring with the reality walking toward him. "No, no, that is a trick, a glamour." Torie and Owen stopped 10 yards from the elders. Torie looked at Montgomery. She didn't growl, she simply projected her aura, the alpha command amplified by the moon goddess herself. It hit the crowd like a physical shockwave. One by one, the wolves in the crowd dropped to their knees, not out of politeness, but because their instincts gave them no other choice. Montgomery stood alone, trembling, fighting the pressure. Torie took one step forward and let out a low, warning huff. Montgomery's cane clattered to the ground. His knees buckled. He fell to the grass, pressing his forehead into the dirt in absolute submission. Chapter 29. The Resolution. Silence reigned over the estate. The only sound was the wind in the trees. Owen moved first. He stepped behind a large oak tree near the edge of the clearing. Eamon immediately broke rank from the crowd, sprinting over to the tree with a bundle of clothes. A moment later, Owen emerged in human form. He had hastily pulled on a pair of loose track pants from the bundle, but ignored the shirt, leaving his chest bare. He carried the spare trench coat Eamon had delivered. He walked to the white wolf, his eyes full of love. "Victoria," he whispered, "you can come back now." Torie looked at him. She felt the pull of humanity, the ache to be in his arms. She closed her eyes, visualizing her human form. The shift back was faster, less painful. The light faded, the fur receded, and bones reshaped. In seconds, Torie Halloway stood on the grass, naked, shivering slightly in the morning chill, her skin flawless and healed. Owen was there instantly, wrapping the coat around her, pulling her into his chest. "You," he breathed into her hair, "are the most terrifying thing I have ever seen." "I told you," Torie murmured, leaning into his warmth, exhausted but exhilarated. "I know how to survive." She turned in his arms to face the council. They were still kneeling. "Rise," Torie said. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried the same weight it had in the forest. The pack rose slowly, eyes wide with awe. Elder Montgomery remained on the ground, too terrified to move. "Eamon," Owen said, his voice cold. "Escort Mr. Montgomery off the estate. He is stripped of his title. He is stripped of his rank. If he sets foot on Gallagher land again, the White Wolf will finish what she started." Eamon grinned, a sharp, predatory expression. "With pleasure, Alpha." 2 days later, Torie was in the garden. The fear and the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a strange, buzzing energy under her skin. She stood in front of a fallen oak log, the result of the storm, that blocked the path. It was easily 500 pounds. She looked around. No one was watching. She grabbed one end of the log. She didn't brace herself, she just lifted. The log rose effortlessly. She held it with one hand, staring at her own bicep. It looked the same, lean, toned, but the power inside was infinite. "CrossFit, huh?" Torie dropped the log, it shook the ground, and spun around. Owen was leaning against the porch railing, sipping coffee, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's functional strength," Torie quipped, breathless. Tire flips. Owen laughed, walking over to her. He kissed her forehead. I think we're going to need heavier tires. Chapter 30. Epilog. 6 months later. The Halloway greenhouse was no longer a struggling business facing foreclosure. It was the premier botanical destination in the state, known for its rare orchids and the massive, living sculptures that seemed to defy gravity. Torie parked her new truck, a matte black, heavy-duty pickup that matched Owen's SUV, in the driveway of the estate. She hopped out, smelling like soil and rain. I'm home, she called out, kicking off her boots by the door. The house was warm, smelling of dinner and fireplace smoke. She walked into the living room and stopped, leaning against the doorframe with a smile. A fire was crackling in the hearth. A thick fur rug was spread out before it. Lying on the rug, in his massive black wolf form, was Owen. He was sprawled on his side, looking completely relaxed, and sleeping directly on top of his head, nestled deep in the black fur between his ears, was Sleaky. The hamster had grown even plumper on a diet of imported Gouda and organic nuts. He looked like a king on his throne. Owen opened one golden eye as Torie entered. He didn't move his head, careful not to disturb the rodent. He let out a soft woof of greeting. Torie walked over and knelt beside them. She scratched Owen behind the ear, then gently booped Sleaky on the nose. My boys, she whispered. Owen shifted, transforming fluidly back into his human form. He carefully scooped Sleaky up and placed him on a velvet pillow nearby, then pulled Torie down onto the rug with him. He hovered over her, his gray-blue eyes searching hers. The scar on his brow crinkled as he smiled. How was work? He asked, tracing her lip with his thumb. Busy. The alpha of the Moon Ridge pack tried to hire me. Owen's eyes flashed possessive gold. I'll buy his pack. Torie laughed, tangling her fingers in his hair. I told him I'm exclusive, one client only. Owen kissed her, slow and deep, pouring all the love and reverence of the last 6 months into the touch. I only want you, he whispered against her lips, eking the roar that had started it all. Forever, Torie replied, sealing the promise. Sleaky squeaked from his pillow, demanding a snack. They both laughed, entwined on the rug, the alpha king and his white wolf, finally, perfectly home. The end.